Today I've got a beautiful blouse to share. It's a souvenir type blouse because it's made with souvenir fabric. Beautiful rayon. This blouse has rouleau loops and a detail you can opt in and out of. Beautiful blouse coming your way. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and I have a blouse to share with you, a woven blouse. Now if you let me pick any type of garment that I'm always excited to sew, from all the types you can imagine, woven blouses will be on the top two along with woven dresses. What I've got is a Danielle Blouse from Seamwork. Now you can have a membership at Seamwork or you can buy patterns separately. That's what I've always done. I've never had a membership. Usually when patterns are released, it's members only, but after a while you can buy them. So the Danielle Blouse is not a new pattern. It's not old either. So I was able to buy it separately. What I liked the most about it was that flounce. So what you see there is that V neckline. Down the center front, you have rouleau loops with a button guard. Very pretty. Love the rouleau loops. If you missed the previous episode, I have a standalone episode all about rouleau loops because I knew that I was going to have this content with that detail. Love the rouleau loops. And then here, in between the facing and the neckline, there is an optional flounce. Goes all the way around here. Very pretty. I love it. But it's optional. You can opt not to do it, and then it's just a V neckline with a facing, basically, if you want that as well. The flounce is double, which is great because then you don't have to hem it. You know, when you have a really round piece, it can be difficult to hem nice and neatly. And the other thing is, when you move around, if the wrong side of the fabric is a little bit different, you would be able to see it. So the fact that it's double wins lots of points in my book. I mean, I love that. Shoulder fit should be at the shoulders. It's not a drop shoulder style. It's not boxy either. It's not a loose fit. It's just right. I think the ease is perfect. Long sleeves, cuff right here. The cuff is really long, so when you see the sleeve piece, it looks short. But don't worry. It's just that the cuff is long. 3 rouleau loops on this area as well. Love that. Another detail of the sleeve other than the cuff and the rouleau loops is a little bound slit. Love that technique. I think it's so much easier and so much more delicate than a towel placket, which is what you usually find more in men's clothing. You see it in women's as well. But if I had to choose between the bound slit and the towel placket, I'm team slit. On the side, it's described there is a French dart there. When you look at the liner, it looks like it's a French dart, but I'll show you later, it's just a bust dart. So if you're worried about a French dart, it's not actually a French dart. It's just an angled bust dart. At the back, it's on the fold. You need light to medium weight fabric here. Now, if you are not opting to do the flounce, I think you can use the lightweight cotton types of fabrics, the cotton lawns, the poplins, the chambrays, 100% linen, you know. But I think if you want the flounce, it should drape. Unless you want a flounce that sticks out and looks super dramatic, which is something I wouldn't want. I would want a flounce to always just fall delicately, and for that you need drape. So 100% rayon linen blend. I think a rayon linen blend, rayon twill, rayon challis, rayon crepe, plain weave rayon, tencel would be great, silk. And then you have your polyester crepes that are lightweight as well, that would work. You need interfacing, you need lots of buttons, 3/8 of an inch, that's what I use. And the other thing, if you don't want to do the rouleau loops, you can use 1/8 inch elastic, like sewing pieces of elastic. I can't fathom doing that. I don't think that would look very nice, so I've never considered that option when I've seen it. I just prefer to do the rouleau loops with the fabric. Sizing is from 0 to 30, but there's one draft from 0 to 16, drafted for 5'8", exactly my height, with a C cup, exactly my cup size. And then the other draft is from 12 to 30, and that's for a 5'9", pretty tall person, taller than me, double D cup. So if you're in the middle of those overlapping sizes, choose the one that matches your bust cup size better. The ease around the bust depends on what draft you're sewing, 4 or 6. 6 if you're sewing the larger size draft, you have a little bit more ease. The same at the hips, 4 or 8. You have detailed finished measurements here for length. You know, these match my proportions perfectly because I'm 5'8". So I never thought I needed to add length to the sleeves or to the body of the blouse, but you might need to if you're shorter or even taller. There are adjustment lines for you to be able to do that. I also had a good look at the photos of the people, the actual people there on the website, because that's always good to see, not just the line art, but the line art gives you lots of information. So I noticed from the get-go the deep V, it looks pretty deep. So I'm going to show you how to make it higher if you want to. I'm being very moderate here, very conservative in my adjustment. I'm just bringing it up by 3/4 of an inch. Line was a little low. I'm going to raise it moderately, just 3/4 of an inch right here. I think that's going to be enough for me to not show cleavage. Of course, that's going to be individual. If you want to raise it up an inch or 1.25 inches, I'm just going to do 3/4. So we're going to need to adjust 3 pieces to do this. The facing and also this flounce, which makes it a little more steps, but it's all doable. So I'm behind the neckline. Now this is going to change the button markings, but they were always going to be my individual ones anyway. So I'm just going to put my ruler here and bring it up by 3/4 of an inch. Now we have this little notch right here. About an inch above it, where I have the paper there, I'm just going to freehand draw this. You can use a curved ruler, but freehand drawing also works. So that's my new neckline right there. So you can see the little bit that came up and then just tapered back into the normal curve right there. Now I'm going to take this facing. This facing matches this exactly. It's the same thing. So I'm going to put the paper behind here and just sort of trace the shape so it's exactly the same as the main one. So just to make it easier, I'm going to put this behind and just match everything up on the edge and then trace the shape I have on the main front piece so that I end up with the same on the facing. And that's just the easiest way to get them to be exactly the same. Now, because I made my neckline higher, that affects the length of the flounce. Basically, with my regular neckline, that was 3/4 of an inch longer here. If I measure from that notch down to the center, this is supposed to match right there. So if I walk this, you can see that this is not going to match anymore. So what I'm going to do is remove length from the flounce right here. Because it's a rounded shape, I'm going to take length from here. So I'm just going to pick a place and do a line between that little mark right here and the edge. Instead of taking the full 3/4 of an inch that I raised, I'm going to be a little bit conservative here and take out a little bit less, 5/8 of an inch. So you can see the slice I'm going to take out. Now, why am I taking less? It's because it's a rounded piece and I think it's more malleable that you could adjust it. I would rather it be a tiny bit long than turn out short. You see this is a rounded shape. It's just not that easy to measure that compared to this other shape. I know it's way too long for the neckline because it came up. So now this is going to be my front piece. It's just a little bit shorter right there because my neckline came up. So when I sew this on later, I'm going to have that match there. And then now this, you can see the notch matches right there. So that is my adjustment. I want to show you that bust dart, and I want to show you a refresher if you need to do a full bust adjustment or a small bust adjustment with this shape dart. It might throw you off a little bit because it's so angled, but the process is sort of the same as any full bust adjustment. So let's see a quick refresher on how to do that. This is the front piece of the Danielle top. I'm sewing the draft that goes from 00 to 16, and that is already drafted with a C cup. So all this dart, the whole process here is going to fit a C cup. Now I'm going to show you where to do the basic lines to cut apart and do full bust adjustment and small bust adjustment. Although I'm not going to do that myself because I am a C cup. I want you to see it's the same thing as any bust adjustment. And the other thing I want to show you is that this is not actually a French dart. Not in the true sense of the word. Let me show you up closer. Here is the notch that would mark where your waist is, right here. And in definition, a French dart combines a waist dart with a bust dart. So it would usually start around the waist or even lower towards the hip. It would be a dart like this. So this is just a bust dart for me. It's just a lower dart and it's a little angled up further than typical darts, which would be a little straighter around here. But just the shape and the depth of it, it's not a true French dart, at least not by definition. Maybe they want to call it that because it angles from a little lower and everything, but it's not hitting the waist at all. So just keep that in mind. Now this is a cutaway dart, so you're meant to cut away this fabric right here.
But when we want to do pattern adjustments, it's better not to do that. It's better to leave extra paper there so we can actually draw the middle of the dart right here. We're meant to go through these dots, and that is where the dart point would be, where that smaller dot is. So I have drawn a line right through the middle up to there. Now the bust apex would usually not be right there. It would usually follow that same angle about 1.5 inches away. So that's where I've drawn a theoretical bust point, bust height right there. It's not on the pattern, but that's where I would put it. Now if I measure, writing the seam allowance down right here from the tip, if I measure down, comparing it to my apex would be around here. But I'm not going to lower this positioning of the dart because it's already lower. And where this point of the dart is, it's right actually at my bust height right there, just further to the side. So my bust is going to be around here, and this dart's going to be further to the side, so it doesn't really have to go down any lower, just because it finishes away from the apex, and it's also further this way. It's a shorter dart there. So I'm not going to be moving the height of this. If I did want to move the height of this, I would do it exactly the same as I do it always. I would pick a place here that covers the whole dart and draw a rectangle, and then I would drop it down and read through the sides. We don't need to do that right here. I also want to show you where to draw the adjustment lines for the full bust adjustment or small bust adjustment. Example, if you were a B cup. From here, from the apex dot, you draw diagonal towards the armhole. If you divide this armhole into 3, imaginary of course, choose the bottom third and just go up to there. Draw up to where the seam allowance is going to be, which is 5/8 here, and draw a dot. We're going to cut up to there, and then from there to there, this is going to be a hinge point right here. So is this point right there. And from here, we draw all the way straight down. We're parallel to the grain line. If you're going to do a full bust adjustment, this area is going to need to be longer. So you would have another adjustment line lower here. You can choose where you want it to be. Let's do some cuts here. From the bottom, all along this line, up to this imaginary apex, right there. Then over to the armhole, up to that point, and then from the edge to that point right there, so we can pivot. Now we cut across the middle of this dart here where I drew that line, and we stop before getting to that point there, so we have another hinge point right here. Okay, another cut line we're going to make is over here, so we can deal with that later. I have that cut line that I've made here, but I'm going to put a tiny piece of tape there just to keep it together momentarily. And now here is where we open it up to do a full bust adjustment. So if you wanted to go from a C to a D cup, you would open this up, making this line parallel by 1/2 inch. So you'd have 1/2 inch here, you'd have 1/2 inch right here. That opens up this dart and makes it bigger. But remember, you're still going to sew the same dart. So you're still going to have this and this dart leg. So the distance here above the dart and below the dart doesn't change. That's why you don't need to touch the side of the back piece. So whether this dart is bigger or smaller, this and this stays exactly the same. Just want to make that clear because I always get that question. So for a D cup, you would just add 1/2 inch right here. If you wanted a double D cup and you were, for example, a size 8, then you would use this draft, because the other draft that goes from 12 to 30 is already drafted for a D cup. So it just depends. If you wanted to go from a C to a double D over here, you would add 1 inch. So you can see my pink cutting mat at the bottom. You would add 1 inch here, and you would have the same inch right there. This has to be very parallel, and that would be your full bust adjustment. You can see the more you add, the shorter this center front becomes. It's not matching. And this is where you would take this down and align it so that it makes sense. So that would be the amount that you would need to add to the center front right here so that it matches up here at the bottom. Whatever you end up needing to add here to the center front for your full bust adjustment is the same thing you will need to add to this facing and to this button guard, just because this blouse has these components on it. So anything you add here, add it here, add it here. These are rectangles. They do have adjustment lines. It does say shorten and lengthen line, but actually it doesn't really matter where you add it because it's just a rectangle. This would be from a C cup to a double D. Smaller, if you're just taking it to a D, it would just be 1/2 inch in there. So this would be a little bit smaller right here. So it matches up. This would be wider. You would still keep those references of the points right there to draw your dot again right there. Now, let's say if you wanted to do a small bust adjustment. So if you were a B cup, for example, this is a C cup. So if you were a size 10, for example, with a B cup, you might want to make a small bust adjustment. In that case, we still needed to cut this, but let's just leave it there together. With a small bust adjustment, you overlap instead of opening up. So you would draw a line here parallel with a 1/2 inch to make it into a B cup. So all this would overlap. So you make sure it overlaps by 1/2 inch up here and down here. And this dot over here is going to become smaller when you overlap. It's just going to have a smaller depth. That's why we have the hinge point there, the hinge point there, so that your pattern stays flat. Now you can see that your center front here is longer than what you need. So you would overlap it a little bit right there to make it a little bit shorter. And that would be your B cup right here. So remember, you would draw a line from here, from that line, parallel, 1/2 inch, and then you would just bring everything over and tape it down, and you would have overlapping paper here. You would have overlapping of this dot. The dot would become a little bit smaller. But remember, if you're doing full bust or small bust adjustment, the distance here and the distance here still stays the same. Remember, the back piece is untouched. If you're making the center front shorter for a small bust adjustment, you would make that one shorter and that one shorter as well. I hope this is a nice refresher. Remember, whether the dot is slanted or whether it's straight, it doesn't change the fact that you draw a line through the dot up to the apex and then to the armhole and then all the way down, parallel to the grain line. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this back up to its original because I'm going to use it as is with the C cup.
This is a pattern I put on a poll on my Patreon page. I made this blouse while I was over in the UK. On my Patreon page, I do a monthly sew-along in full-on detail, usually intermediate to advanced patterns. Even if you're not that experienced, it's so detailed you will be able to sew it. So I welcome you to join. It is a paid membership. Only join if you are able to financially, of course. You can stay for a little bit or for a long time. It is one of the ways I make an income monthly, and it makes a huge difference.
These are the pieces that you need to interface to make this blouse. It's not so many compared to other things I've made, but it's still quite a few. Now, this is the button guard, and it's just one piece. It's meant to be interfaced. I'm doing block fusing as always. This is my back facing. I did extend it and cut another mirror image out of scrap paper to create an extended piece like that. Now, I left this one for the very end. I got it from a tiny scrap, and I had to add a center back seam to this facing. No one's going to know. It's going to be on the inside. So I have already actually sewn that seam there, pressed it open, and now I'm going to pretend it's not even there. If you're wondering about cutting, I sewed it exactly at that width and reinforced. So when I cut through, now the seam's not going to fall apart, just so you know. This is the front facing. This is the one that we modified to make it higher right there. This is the cuff. Now, why do I have two? It's because you have to cut 4. I have 2 pairs. I have a layer that's interfaced on the top and a layer that's not interfaced on the bottom. I want to cut these together at the same time so nothing moves, nothing shifts. So basically, those are all the pieces. Block fusing, as always, is going to let the fabric shrink beforehand so that when you end up cutting, your piece hasn't changed size or shape, it hasn't deformed, and you end up with pieces that are exactly the same as your paper pattern piece right there. This is something I always do. You're always going to see me do the same thing. So we'll just get these pieces cut out. I find rayon does react to the glue of the interfacing. It does change. So definitely good practice to do it like this. Okay, here are the main pattern pieces for the Danielle blouse. This is the back, it's on the fold. This is the front. This is the angled dart that we have here on the side. To finish the blouse on the inside, there is the facing for the front, there is the facing for the back. And this single piece here is a button guard. The way that we're going to finish this with loops, rouleau loops. So that's going to be behind it. It's never going to let your skin show. What we have here are the flounce pieces. Now, if you don't want to sew them, they are optional. You could just finish this with a facing, front and back. The flounce is just going to be in between these 2 layers. So if you wanted to skip this detail, it's very easy. Now these flounces are cut double, which means that we're going to sew them, flip them, and it's not going to be hemmed as such. It's going to have a neat edge and you're going to have the same fabric on both sides. So we have 2 for the back, and for the front we have 2 pairs. So it's 1 piece that you cut twice, so there's 4 pieces right there, but mirrored. Here are the sleeve pieces. It's a typical sleeve. It's just a little bit shorter because the cuff is quite long. So the length of the sleeve will be completed with the cuff there. Cuff pieces, I have 2 layers here. One is interfaced, one isn't. So I've already matched up each cuff with each cuff right there. This is the binding that's going to go on the little slit. If you look at the double notch on the sleeve and you go down on that side, you're going to find that slit close to this side. Now the binding, it said you were supposed to cut it on the bias. You don't need to cut this type of binding on the bias. I have sewn about 20,000 patterns that have the binding on the straight of grain. And I have tried both. It's a straight type of binding. It doesn't go around any curve. There's actually no reason to cut it on the bias. So I cut mine on the straight of grain. It says to cut it 1 inch wide. I think that's too narrow, so I cut mine 1 inch and 1/4 wide here. 8 inches long, 20 centimeters. There's going to be a bit left over that we need to trim off later. I suggest the binding be a little bit wider, just 1/4 inch wider, and on the straight of grain, it's going to look amazing. It's still valid, and it's going to be easier to manipulate if it's on the straight of grain. Now, the bias piece, to create the rouleau loops, you're supposed to cut 2 pieces and join them. I do not have the square that it says on the pattern that you're supposed to cut it. You're supposed to cut 1 square of fabric and create 2 bias cut strips. Well, my leftovers are not the size that I'm going to need. So I'm going to need to cut my rouleau loops in more pieces. I'm still going to be able to get the 14 that I need out of this piece of fabric. I'm still going to be able to cut bias cut strips like this. Each piece is little, but when we get to that point, I will cut them out and see how that's going to turn out. I wouldn't stress too much about that because I know I have enough from what's left over to cut these little loops. You know, they're tiny. Okay, here we have the French dart, which is just a bust dart, and we have this cutout piece here. We need to join these raw edges of fabric, but further from that tip right there that you see, there's a dot and then there's another dot. So that first dot that you see, there it is, marked in red, there and there. So from this cut point, I'm going to cut through to that first dot with my scissors, straight cut, just to that first dot. That last dot needs to stay as it is. So I can clearly see it, and I'm going to cut there, right there. And now I'm going to join these raw edges together, and the tip is going to be from that furthest dot that we have over here. I'm going to put my pin there, align the raw pieces of fabric here. I prefer the dart be marked on the pattern. So from here, the seam allowance is going to be smaller, it's going to get bigger until we get to this point here. And from here onwards, it's going to be 5/8 of an inch. So it's slightly curved. It's going to be close to the edge, it's going to get wider. And once you're into that straight edge, then it's going to be 5/8 down here. And that's how we sew the French dart. So here on the tip, I'm going to put it in through with hand cranking. So it's right on the edge, no back tucking, and we start. I'm going to give it a little bit of a rounded shape. Okay, that's a straight section, and I'm on the 5/8 seam allowance. The tip over here, we just knot it by hand, and afterwards, when I get to the serger, I'm going to serge all of this raw area from the dart. Okay, I've had a good look at this dart from the wrong side. Here's the shoulder. So this is all the volume of the dart. This has been trued so that the dart volume is pressed up. So you can see when you press this up, you've got fabric all the way along the edge. If you were to press it down, it's not going to work. You're going to have this raw edge. And when you catch it in the seam allowance, you're going to end up with raw bits. So this particular French dart or dart has been trued to be pressed up, which is not a common way to press a dart. I like pressing my darts down. I know some people press them up, but in this case, you have to press it up if you want your sides to be okay later. So just particular about this one. Although in the instructions it says to press it down, don't do it because this hasn't been true to be pressed down.
I bought this fabric in Athens, so this was one of the first souvenir fabrics I got while I was over there. So happy. I love the swirly print. I'm not into florals that much. I do like them, but I love fabrics that are not anything. So I like that beige and that green color. This is the Flounce. Here are the rouleau loops. I bought these little delicate buttons at Hobbycraft. They cost me a fortune. Check out that rouleau loop right there. I got it to focus. There's many of these. It took a while. So worth it though. Remember, I have that separate episode all about rouleau loops. The thing about rouleau loops is that both of these centers are together. They're like butting together right there. You're never going to have gaping because we have this button guard behind it. So check out this. This button guard is always going to be behind it and the other side is going to be budding right there. So there's always going to be that piece of fabric. So you're never going to see skin. It's just so much nicer than buttonholes, where sometimes if you don't calculate properly, this, it might open, it might show your skin. It's not going to happen with this. And I really like that. On the inside, there's a facing, that's the interface, that finishes everything. So if you wanted to just do the blouse and the facing, then you just get a regular blouse with a V neckline with no flounce. Remember, the flounce is totally optional. The flounce has seams here on the shoulder, front and back flounce pieces. They are rounded. They take quite a lot of fabric. I'm going to be honest there. It's quite a lot of fabric. The sleeve was very easy to set in here. No issues there. At the bottom of the sleeve, we have the rouleau loops and the buttons and the bound slit right there. I will leave you linked a video all about these bound slits because that technique has its own little episode as well. So you can see how I do it. It's always the same thing. In patterns, it's always the same thing as well. And then towards the bottom, it's just very simple side seams. There is an angled dart here on the side. This is how it looks like on the inside. There's a button guard right there. So you're never going to see skin. It's very, very safe. There's no gaping. It's better actually than buttonholes because you have that button guard behind everything. Not hard to sew. It's also sandwiched between the facing. That angled bust dart there, you can barely see it. It's serged. It's a type of cutaway dart. I showed you that. So that's a little bit different, but it's not a French dart. French darts come from the waist lower. Pants are one of my favorites. The summer key pants from Love Notions. I'm going to plug it in that they are on sale right now. I'll leave you the information below. But they are a beautiful green color. I've had these since 2019. And when I see fabric, I think of those pants and think, it's going to go with my pants. So let's see this blouse styled with those pants. This is my Danielle Blouse from Seamwork Patterns. I made a size 14 US. I used the draft that goes from 0 to 16. This one is drafted for a C cup and I am a C cup. It's also for 5'8" and that is exactly my height, so I didn't need to make any pattern modifications. I've got it tucked out just so you can see the ease and the length of the original blouse. Print is very busy. It's 100% rayon I bought in Greece, so this is a souvenir fabric. It's going to be a special blouse. And up closer you can see the length at the mid hip. Nice amount of ease. But the way I would actually wear this with these types of pants, because they're a little bit wider at the bottom, is tucking it in. So let's do that. I think it looks more balanced. The pants are wide on the legs, but they still fit really well at the waist and the hips. These are the summer key pants from Love Notions. The green is a perfect match for this fabric. I bought this fabric thinking about these pants and I think they match beautifully. This neckline is a V. It's actually a bit deeper than this. I raised it by 3/4 of an inch, but I could have raised it even more. Maybe 3/4 more. I'm still not showing anything, but this is the deepest I would go. This flounce that you see here is in a double layer. It's sandwiched between the neckline and the facing finish on the inside. The flounce is optional. Very fun to sew these little rouleau loops here, although the print doesn't show them that much. I can clearly see them with my eyes, and so will anyone else that is gonna see me wear this blouse. Buttons, super delicate. There is a slanted bust dart that's a little lower, slants up to my bust point. I didn't really need to modify this dart. And we have the same detail on the cuffs of the sleeves. There's a little bound slit, pretty nice long cuff with 3 rouleau loops. Just take into account the depth of this V. It's designed to be very low. I think I would like to raise it further if I made this again, but I'm still not showing anything. I love it. It's delicate, beautiful. If the flounce isn't your thing, you'll still have a really nice well-fitting blouse. The rouleau loops are darling. I love it. So beautiful. I like Seamwork patterns. I think the instructions are super clear. The diagrams are amazing. Maybe the sizing could be too tall for you, but those are things you can always adjust. At least for me and what I need, they suit me really well, and that makes me super happy. I don't need to do length adjustments usually, which I need to do with other pattern brands. So there's always little different things with blocks and different brands. I really like this one. The only thing though, whenever I've done a Seamwork pattern, I've always had to raise the neckline for some reason. So I think that is something I'm going to look closely at. I mean, that's something I consider with any pattern. Know that you can always adjust that as well. Have a look at this one. I'm not affiliated to Seamwork, nothing like that. I don't receive commissions. Just like the pattern, sewed it up and shared it with you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you like rouleau loops, don't be scared. They're really fun to do. Takes a little patience, but the result is always super nice. See you soon. Bye.